Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unplugged with Taylor, where we discuss 5D concepts to help you thrive in a 3D world. We are here virtually today with Zack Alexander. Zack, I'm going to let you take it away on your intro, your bio.
I seem to be changing my title and bio like quite often. I think there's always difficulty in finding the right language to describe the work we do, but I would consider myself a spiritual and leadership mentor. I focus on trauma integration. I focus on spirituality from a much more grounded lens, and there's actually a lens of political philosophy and working with the healthy masculine that I incorporate into my work as well.
Oh, so much there. Thank you for jumping on here with me today.
Of course.
Glad to be here. Yeah, there's also like a northeast coast vibe to you that I love. I love that you bring a little uh, a new energy to this space that I really resonate with, which is why I loved your content in your page as well.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I grew up right outside Philadelphia. I spent my early adulthood in Queens, and so I always felt it was very important to not lose that part of me.
Yeah, yeah. And I know, so we were just kind of chatting beforehand. I've been on a spiritual journey for the past year, and I've really taken a step back from the news, from just activism that I used to be really passionate about, and just all the things so that I could focus on my own healing. And I genuinely believe that I came across your content because it's kind of a reminder of like a new way that I'm being called to show back up in those spaces and to speak about the things that I am so passionate about, because we were talking like you're passionate about those things for a reason. Like I spent 15 years at the front line of public education
Yeah.
and saw these like incredible souls, our youth, and saw what they were going through and saw like how we're failing them on a systemic level. And I'm so passionate about that. So I need to start showing back up and speaking out about that from a healed perspective. So I would love to like start there and what that can look like for people.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even dive into a little bit of my own personal journey to give it
Yes.
context. But I came from a very like highly traumatic childhood. A lot of us who have awakenings or find ourselves in the spiritual sphere obviously did too. Um, but I went through a bedridden illness. I came out of that. I really turned my life around. I got a full scholarship to a top law school, and I was really passionate about the work that I wanted to do. I wanted to go into child advocacy law. Like I saw how the systems and institutions failed me as a kid, right? Like a lot of my trauma actually came because institutional systems and structures did not show up for me the way they're supposed to. Right. And so, then obviously I have an awakening, like I start questioning things. I get every sign from the universe to leave law school. And I really dive even more deeply into my healing journey and incorporating like the energetic spiritual aspect of that. But like along the way, I was highly encouraged from whether it's mentors or big influencers, like big spiritual influencers, that like everything's perfect, giving your energy to like political systems or what's going on in our world is low vibe. Like you're given these narratives, like you need to be above this. Like just don't give this energy. Um, and so I'm on this healing journey, and I'm working on myself, and there are real layers that I'm uncovering within myself that are helpful, like understanding how my trauma is living in my body and living in my nervous system, and the coping mechanisms I've taken in. But like I started to lose a congruent sense of self because the things that mattered to me were suddenly, I was told, not important. And I literally felt my heart shut down for all these notions about self love and this fear. I felt empty, and there was a void inside me. And it took like 2 to 3 years in where it was like, this isn't right, you know? Um, and I really recaptured those parts of me and rediscovered my passion for social advocacy, what goes on in our political systems, infrastructures. I'm still very concerned and conscientious of what needs to happen in our education systems. and to our children, right? And so over the last few years, I've just there have been windows in my life to get more involved in that. Obviously, very as a Jewish man, I'm very involved in what's going on with Palestine and sticking up for the Palestinian cause and liberation. And I feel like I'm back to myself. But now my trauma's not running me either. You know, I was very confused when I got a push from the universe to leave law school. Like, oh my God, this must all be for nothing. And it was like, it was funny because it was almost like a detour that took me back to the same exact place I was always meant to be. And it was like, no, like you're still kind of actually meant to be in the legal sphere, but from a healed place and from a place where that sphere isn't consuming you, right? Because you said, like, if you've been in the education system, if you've been in the legal sphere, you've been in the medical system, if you really don't have your feet underneath you, that system can devour you, especially when you are trying to make real, like, systemic change and progress. So the capacity to step out and to work on yourself, to get grounded, to really understand your values and principles, and then to reinsert yourself back in there from a more clear space. I think that's what's actually going to create the change we're all so desperate for.
Oh, that was so beautifully put, and so much there. Like, your story that you've got, as a highlight, you gave like a highlight reel kind of your
Yeah,
experience and who you are on your page, which I really loved. It inspired me to kind of start my own process like that, which has been, it's very emotional to do it, but
yeah,
I was so inspired reading it for so many reasons. But for one, I was like, damn, this guy can't catch a fucking break. Like, like I kind of have my own moments with myself, like where I'm like, damn, like things were so hard for me as a
yeah,
kid. Like, I really got handed a shitty deck, which I've, shifted my perspective and thinking about it from this gave me powers and gifts, and
yeah,
this is all part of my purpose. But not only did you get through all of that, but then you spent all these years being told you were dying from this disease that
yeah,
completely debilitated you. Like, gosh, I mean, the whole thing. Like, and then talking about, coming out of that and being in this relationship, but because of everything you were still carrying, it's like you get the things you want, but you lose it all because you aren't the version of yourself that has the capacity to hold it yet. So you
yeah,
got to go through this whole. Not everybody has that kind of fight in them.
yeah,
I mean, that's a lot. Like, there's this. I think I told you this when we chatted before, but like before I was even spiritual or knew anything about it, I would meet people sometimes, and I'd be like, man, they got that fighter spirit, because you can just feel that they've been through so much. They've been through things that would break a lot of people, and they have just, there's some part of them that's so strong that it's like dragging the other parts of you to, like, come on, we gotta get over this shit, we gotta fix ourselves, we gotta get better, we gotta do something about this. And that generates this intensity and this passion and this energy that I recognize in other people, which again I think is what really drew me to your content. And also, like, now that I have went through my spiritual awakening. I think I'm still in it, by the way. I'm
yeah,
not gonna say I'm on the other side or anything, but now I see it as like, oh, there's a purpose, there's a reason. Like, this was not all for nothing. Um, One of the things, like, when you were talking, and I was thinking about this last night, in the education system is, and in the legal sphere and in all of our different medical system now, it's all, everything's become very much systemic, a system, if you
yeah,
will. And so
yeah,
it's taken away a lot of the individual, a unique approach to people, and it's kind of taken out nuance, right?
yeah,
So we're in the education system trained to, like, data driven decision making. Everything's based on data, data, data. And I would kind of be shamed in meetings when I would bring in, like, my anecdotal experience. Not shamed, but
yeah,
it was not the culture of our meetings to bring up an anecdotal story, because everything was supposed to be based on the data. And anecdotal was, like, considered not relevant. And so even as an adjunct, I would find myself, discussing something, and the grad students would be like, yeah, I remember this one time. And I'm like, oh my God, that doesn't make a research study, your one experience. And as I was going through just everything I've went through this past year and everything I've seen about like our culture and the way it's all very intentionally structured, I've realized they're teaching us to abandon our experiential knowledge,
Mhm.
abandon what we know in our body and our heart to be true,
Yeah.
and only listen to what we're told.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, like the anecdotal piece and your own experiential knowledge matters. So, that's been an interesting just shift in thinking for me, really, is like, oh, that does matter what our own experiences are, and the anecdote does matter.
Yeah, well, lived experience matters tremendously. I don't think there's any better education than actually through lived experience. Um, our whole Western systems and institutions were created like during the Industrial Revolution for us to essentially be factory line workers, right? Even our education system was created under the same premise, so that you know how to follow rule A to B to C. Thinking creatively or thinking outside the box or like using your own ingenuity, like that was not encouraged because we need you to function within a system and keep it running, right? And so this is what we're looking to over like change and overdo now, basically. That was part of the trauma for me, right? Like that was part of the trauma that I had to work through for my own journey, is that I was conditioned to think within a box and actually was shamed for even trying to step out of that. Like I was someone that within like the education system growing up was considered like dumb, you know, or low performing. And I remember that after I went through my illness or whatever, like I so deeply wanted to feel approved and validated by society that I did the things the way they told me to do it. I got one of the highest scores you could on that law school entrance exam. And I just noticed that once again, like I felt like I was betraying myself or like I was burying parts of myself to exist inside the system that wasn't looking to recognize me as a person, right? That was looking at me as a machine. And that's what I also went through with my illness. And so everyone is being conditioned to be this machine. And then you even get into the spiritual sphere and we start applying these spiritual principles, but we're still almost applying it through this machine type concept of like manifest your dreams, manifest a top income, manifest this. And it's so deeper. It's so much deeper than that. We're so complex as people and as humans. And we need to hold space to understand that. We need to hold space to understand people's lived experience, to understand what they've been through, how it colors their perspective. We're not all one for one, you know? And so this is a big thing that I'm trying to get at my work. There's no way that I apply the same techniques or whatever with every single person. Like I have to understand them on a deep level, understand their own lived experience on a deep level, and then let them hold a space where they can find their way there themselves.
Yes, you're your own healer.
Yeah.
That's I've been navigating that as well, like giving my power away, putting too much stake in what like different spiritual healers say. So now, like, really noticing the ones that say, like, will hold me my feet to the fire and be like, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
Like, look within yourself for that answer, versus the ones who are like, more rely on me. I have the answers, XYZ. But yeah, the same issues that we're seeing in our world, we're seeing within the spiritual community. And I really have been so intrigued by everything that you've said about that. And like I said, I heard you talking about manifestation and the law of attraction, and how to apply those principles to manifest your dream partner, to manifest your dream life. And you're like, well, wait a minute, if we understand that, why is nobody talking about how we can collectively manifest a new world for everyone in it? And I thought that really was so applicable, because like I speak a lot in my adjunct classes about individualism versus collectivism. And the United States is considered the most individualistic country in the world. I mean, we are taught it's all about self, comparison, beating competition. Like there isn't a culture of collaboration and collectiveness. And so, of course, manifestation is being marketed here as something that you can use to collect what you want versus, wait a minute, we could actually all be working together. I loved your example about if we want a government that works for the people and is actually beholden to us until instead of what it's become, which is this like is oligarchical a word?
Yeah, oligarchy, just serving corporate
Yeah,
masters. Yeah, just serving corporations and all that.
we could collectively put our energy and attention on that and shift the reality that we in or shift the timeline or however you want to
Yeah.
describe it. So why are not enough people talking about that?
Because we've been trained from a young age to not look at it through that. And like, this is
Mm-hmm.
what I experienced. And, we talked about this before even getting on the podcast of like, I just felt empty when I was doing all the things that I was told to do by the spiritual wellness sphere. Like, I could not wrap my head around. I did the tricks and I even got some of the things.
Mm.
And but like why don't I feel better? I actually feel worse about myself. Like, oh my God, do I need to do another affirmation? And realistically, like this is the messiness of taking a lot of like Eastern mysticism and philosophy and then smashing it into a Western, like a hyper Western consumerist, like individualist culture, right? Where we are taught to be the perfect consumer and everything is about me, 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 me. It's all about my own self actualization. It's all about my own individuation process. And you don't really matter outside of what I can grab from you. It's a very extractive thing. Like it is like a shadow in the psychology of the West. But like this, what we're doing with the spiritual stuff is almost amplifying that shadow. And people get the things they want, but I have clients come into me like, I have the beautiful life and I feel stuck. Like, what's going on? And it's like, because you care about the world. And like, it upsets you, and that's not bad, that's not wrong. And so, it's so interesting that I hear so many people in the spiritual sphere being like, I manifested my dream life, I got everything I wanted, but when it comes to all the things wrong in the world, I feel so powerless and helpless. And it's like, why are they so like divergent from one another? Like, why can't we collectively come together, work together, and say, hey, this is the world we want to build together. Let's build an education system that works for kids, that really grows and expands our children into beautiful, whole human beings that don't have to be medicated, just stay in a seat for 8 hours a day. You know, let's create a medical system that doesn't look at you as a machine and individual parts, and chronic illness isn't through the roof. Let's create a mental health system that also looks at you as a person, right? And not something that's dysfunctional to diagnose. Like, why can't we create these systems? Why can't we envision them? And when we do, like the political leaders that have been running us, that like really none of us are fans of, they can't stay. Like that energy is too strong. It'll kick them out. So this is why this is a revolution of consciousness. But I think people aren't understanding what that means, you know. Um, but really, like it is fundamentally about unity. It is about coming together. It's about having a collective vision. It's about holding it together. And we can genuinely create the world that we want, but we have to believe we can, and we have to put in the action together.
God, that was beautiful. A revolution of consciousness. I love that. Early on in my journey, I was talking to someone about manifestation and I was like, well, wait a minute, people could start doing that now. And she was like, yeah, you can do that without going down the spiritual path or doing your shadow work. She was like, and that's the fastest way to live an empty life
Yeah,
is to manifest all these things that you think you want from a place of lack. And then there you are with all the things you thought you wanted. I think that is, speaks to some of the things we've seen with like suicide and people that people we're looking at and we're like, that person had everything.
yeah,
Yeah. So they had nothing to keep them going. Like, oh, I'm going to be happy when I have this. I'm going to feel better when I have this. They finally realized, oh, wait, this isn't the path, and I've been chasing things, or I've been chasing fame, or I've been chasing money
Yeah.
this whole time, and now that I have all those things and I still feel empty, well, there must be no hope for me. And I think that I really catch myself like as I'm making a shift, a career shift, and making online content. Like every leg of my journey, I'm like, okay, well, this now, this now, this now, this, and reminding myself, like, well, you're never going to be happy if this is how you're looking at it. Is like always what's next,
Yeah.
or like the next thing that I want, or the next accolade through fill in the blank
Yeah.
your career that you want, or the person, or whatever. We're like, that is something, I think you talk about a collective shadow. Like,
Yeah.
there are so many of us still stuck in the thinking of the next thing, the next thing outside of myself is
Yeah.
going to bring me the feeling that I want.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a collective shadow, and it's this mentality, and it's rooted for centuries, millennia of like, if I overpower my environment, then I will feel safe, and then I will feel good. If I overpower it, right? If I can hyper control my external world, then I'll be good. But collectively, if we're all embodied in that, it's going to drive the world off a cliff. Because like a lot of what really real spirituality truly is about being in relationship with yourself and relationship with the world. It is really about noticing like this cohesive flow. Like the circle of life is the most beautiful complex thing. Like it has to be divine. The fact that everything works in perfect unison, right? With different animals needing to rely on different insects and things of that nature. It's this back and forth, and it functions perfectly. And when we try to step outside of that, when we don't understand that union, when we're just in our heads and like, I need this, it has to be like this, it, that not only creates like a void in your soul, but you're like collectively, if we do that, like we will run the world off a cliff. Like the earth will chuck us off. I really believe that. So it is really important. Like indigenous cultures did understand this. Like they had this wisdom of how to coexist in their environment, how to be in deep relationship with the land, like everything around them, right? But like what I've seen from Western spirituality is we go into like indigenous spirituality and we just grab at what's going to make us feel good and then chuck them and not actually understand the real beauty and what we're really here to learn from that, you know. And so this is why this stuff is so important, and I don't see it talked about nearly enough.
You gave such a good example before we started recording of like, the Native American chiefs, they understood the principles of manifesting, but they weren't manifesting all the buffalo for their tribe or for themselves. Like, it was the context, right? It was about collective focus on what was good for the earth, what was good for, there was gratitude in everything. They thanked the buffalo for its offering. They didn't waste anything. Like, all of those pieces mattered. And Western colonialism
Yeah.
brought
Yeah.
something so different here.
Yeah, 110%. And like, look, I had to work with the colonizing mentality myself. Like that was part of my healing process. Like, as a white dude, like I really had to look and be like, I have been trained. I just have been trained to like override my own internal environment. Like I still have the coffee right here. Like I need I need energy, right? Like it's I need this. And so you have my body has to comply, right? My body
Mhm.
needs to function like this. And we wonder why we have a chronic illness and a mental health epidemic because we're literally trained to not listen to our bodies and our minds when they're trying to speak to us. I mean, a big part of my journey was the 4-year illness, but I saw that like my body like was speaking to me through that, and it was like something's not okay, something's not right. People say like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you went through that," and I have gratitude for the illness because like it was my body showing me what needed to change. Um, and indigenous cultures did understand that they didn't look at illness as this really bad thing. They looked at it as like, hey, it may be signaling something to you that you're not paying attention to. But like the drive engine light flashes on for us, and us in Western society are going to like the mechanic and be like, can you just turn the light off? But it's like, what? Why is it on? I don't know. Turn it off. It bothers me, you know, and and that's and it just then the issues compound. So this really is like about, like I said, it's about relationship. It's about relationship with yourself. It's about understanding the ways that we've been trained to like be so goal and achievement oriented, or like I need to feel good all the time. It's like you don't probably like life happens. You're gonna go through a breakup. Someone might pass. Well, you're gonna be excuse my language. You're gonna be fucking sad.
Yeah.
Like, and that's good, you know. And so we have to be more accepting of what our world is and not constantly try to override it because we feel like we need to attain or achieve something.
Oh my gosh. So that makes me think about a recent realization I've had about being in a flow state. I'm like, I want to be in a flow state. Like I
Yeah,
want to be, on my spiritual path, like my soul's path, like watching the flow of energy and not forcing,
yeah,
um instead going where I'm directed. But what I had to realize about that is that doesn't mean I'm only going to be directed in the places that I want to go,
yeah,
because I've been thinking about it. You're talking about it in the context of your illness, thinking about that in the context of dating. I'm like, now why did my energy, like, why would spirit lead me to this person? Like, why
yeah,
would I have this excitement and this energy about this person that just was not right for me? And then I was like, because they held the key to a lesson that I needed to unlock within
yeah,
myself, that I would not have been able to heal and bring forth to continue on my journey had I not had that experience. So flow state doesn't mean only flowing to the, pretty places that you want to go. It means like sometimes you're going to be drawn to a place that's going to bring forth those shadow pieces that would not be coming out if you hadn't gone in that route.
yeah. No, I mean 100%. I mean for myself, like, we'll go back to the story of like where I had the full scholarship to the top law school. I had a $200,000 a year job like waiting for me, like at the end of it, like I given myself everything, and then I was guided to leave, to just withdraw. And I ended up, doing trauma healing in St. Louis, Missouri. Like I started my own personal practice, and people. It was initially a mindfulness, but people kept coming in with trauma. I kept referring them out to therapists, and they said, no, we don't. We want to come to you. And so I had to learn everything and hold that space. I- I'll be fully transparent. I did not enjoy the first 3 years of my career. I was in a flow state. I truly was. Like I was doing what I was shown up, and I was holding space for the worst trauma, but that's where I was needed. Like I had been
Mm.
through it myself. I understood it. Like at the very least, at the beginning, I was able to just give people empathy in a way that the mental health community was not. I could see them because I saw myself in them, and it wasn't a healing experience for me, but like it's where I needed to be, and it put me in a space to see some shadows within myself that I don't think I would have seen in the legal sphere. And like I said, like that was tough, and I was even a little bit scarred from it, but like that was also being of service. Like it's not always about what your ego wants. It really is about listening to something beyond yourself. And sometimes the reasons you're in a space aren't even fully about you, and that's I think that's a little bit difficult for people in the West to understand. Um, but there's a deep fulfillment and purpose in that, right? And you do come out feeling more whole from participating in that aspect of the flow state. And yes, it'll take you into spaces sometimes that aren't appealing on the surface.
That was so, again, so well put. I guess I'm thinking for people listening. So like I taught for several years before I was an administrator in some schools that needed, where your kiddos needed a lot. Like they were
Yep.
coming in, there was gang activity in the neighborhoods. There was a lot of poverty, a lot of trauma. Like there was a lot of violence within the school, drug use, etc. But like some of the sweetest souls and some of the things that I saw, like, are so imprinted on me and hit me on a soul level, like gave me a fuel and a passion to serve that words can't even describe.
Yeah.
But on the surface, it was a very stressful job. I
Yeah.
mean, like, I was sometimes I was like, guys, what are y'all fighting about? I haven't even finished my coffee. Literally, it's
Yeah.
8:15. Like, what is happening? It was just you couldn't do anything but laugh because at time like laughter has always been so
Yeah.
healing for me because it'd just be nuts.
Yeah.
But I learned so much and it gave me such an important perspective. And, I going in other schools that were not serving the same communities. I told somebody one time, I was like, yeah, I really like to walk in and smell the dysfunction.
Yeah.
Like, but
Yeah.
what it was is like, that's where at that point in time, that's where I needed to be
Yeah.
for some reason or another. And some part of me felt that. So, what, like, and the example that I gave was not about serving, but it was about how I've noticed how my energy flow leads me to spaces sometimes I don't want to go. So what about, like, even though you weren't, it was tough what you were doing, was there like an energy that, like a passion that fueled you through it, that you knew like this is where I need to be right now?
It was complicated. I think because I was in, and this is a little off topic, but it's related. Like I was just in the sphere where I was holding space for people's trauma. They were getting better, but then I was also in this like very like whitewashed spiritual sphere that like was all about looking like everything is so pretty and I was like, how the hell is this my world while in this sphere? And so I felt like I was almost like going insane, like
Mm.
because it felt like there was still like a facade being put on top of what the real work was done. Um, I I would say that like when I made the work my own, I felt very fulfilled. I was still called to take on certain clients with like horrific maybe addiction issues or have been through horrific abuse, and like I could dive in and I felt great about it. But it really, I had to deconstruct like some of the bullshit, I got to be honest, from like the wellness spaces and really just be in my experience fully and know like, yeah, this is where I'm called to be. There were moments where like I was called to take on donation clients, like and it wasn't about my income being the highest level, it is what it is. And I felt good about that. This path has been a lot more difficult for me than I think the typical spiritual path you hear about, right? But I feel like a better man, like at the end of it. And to me, I think that's the goal, especially with men on this journey. Um, if like when you read about like great men throughout history, like they didn't have it easy. Like I don't know why we have this notion that our men need to like fuck off to Bali and just go to every tantra retreat, and that's going to make them the divine masculine or whatever you want to use, right? I'm not saying that like that's not valid for like some men's journeys, but like you're going to get thrown through the fire a little bit, and you're going to be of service, and you're going to see all like a lot of different layers and elements of the human experience that won't be pretty. And I think we really need to start normalizing that. Like, I really think to be on a spiritual journey is to like really deeply understand like all the different elements of what it is to be in this world. And so you're going to be taken to very different environments, and all of it might not be Instagrammable. Like, all of it might not be able to be, thrown on a nice little like what do you color palette? I don't know, whatever scrapbook. I don't know, whatever you do on Instagram, you put all the fun, pretty photos. Like, it might not be able to fit in there, and that's okay, you know. And that's being human. Like, I think we're overcomplicating a process that we all understand at our deepest core, which is to be a person. We've been through some trauma that we need genuine tools on how to deconstruct. We need to be able to look at some things, but like it's the spiritual journey is not that different from what we're already doing. Like, and I've seen the ETs and all that stuff, and then it's like, hi, good to see you guys. All right, I got to go back and pay car insurance. So like, that's cool that you're here. Like, it's just wonderful. I still got to make sure the toilet's running correctly. Like, it is what it is.
That was something that kind of threw me for a loop when I started journeying, like doing plant medicine journeys with a
Yeah,
group of people. Because I came to plant medicine not from the spiritual way, but from like, I became obsessed with I read a book about how trauma impacts the brain, and I
Yeah.
read it for work. And as I was reading it, I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Me too.
Like, this is me.
Yeah.
So it allowed me to really like set aside a lot of shame in my like private life, where I was like very much chasing all these accolades and degrees, and like trying to be the best at work, and trying to be, you know, the best in every aspect of my life, because I just wanted approval and
Yeah.
acceptance. And I was hiding all these shadow parts where, like, I've spoken in some other episodes, I was battling alcoholism, a drug addiction,
Yeah.
you know, toxic relationships. Like, you know, all these things were hidden. Um, and it helped me set aside shame enough to be like, okay, like, that,
Yeah.
you know, some of these things are really impacting you that you haven't visited. And so then I became obsessed with understanding neuroscience. And then I was like, okay, well, it's hard to rewire your brain. How can I rewire my brain? I did ketamine therapy, then started with mushrooms. That brought me to, you know, my spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And I say all that to say that, okay.
Right.
So when I first started doing plant medicine, I was I had a sitter the first time, worked through a lot of trauma, and then I was like, oh, again, that over ambitious kind of like, I'm like, every month I'm going to set a new intention and a new thing to fix
Yeah.
about myself, and I'm in it. So I started just alone taking 3, 4, 5 grams with my journal and my
Yeah.
mask, and had this
Yeah.
plan of things I was going to fix, and that kind of like kicked my ass about 4 journeys in, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I can't do this by myself. It speaks to what you were saying about like taking something out of context and
Yeah.
not like ignoring the ceremonial, you know, ritual aspect of it, and those pieces had purpose. I actually said out loud during my fourth experience that was so tough, I was like, am I being punished? What did I do? Am I not respecting the medicine? So anyways, when I first, back to what you said, when I first started journeying with a group, I was like, oh, everybody's here to work through deep trauma, right? And there were people that were like, I was over there talking to a, you know, goblin, or I was like, you know, talking with people, spirits from the other side, or they're over here having a witchy seance, which cool, but like, I was like, what's the point of that? You know, like, what is the, you know, it just was interesting to me, because my goal was like, work through trauma, be better, feel better,
Yeah.
like have grand realizations, look at my shadows. And it was interesting to me to see that, you know, there were people that were very much using it to like go talk to, you know, witches and wizards or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's here's the thing. Like, you can have one intention with plant medicine, and it'll completely override it. You know, and that's it's funny. Like, I've taken, you know, mushrooms has always been something that really has resonated with me and my journey. And like, I would take mushrooms, and I'd be like, I just want to feel good, guys. And like, and then I would just feel my psyche dip into hell. I'd be like looking like, oh no, come on, like, you don't do this to me. And I was like, you got to reconcile something, man. And so like that, you know, I've been in that part of the journey, and then like I did another, like I did IV ketamine therapies where, you know, I was very guided to go and do that, and I was there to heal trauma. Like, I was there to heal trauma, and I was blasting off and talking to blue shaboobababoops. I don't know what to call them. I was like, wait, I thought, and they're like, this experience is important too. So like, you know, that's why I love the skill of integration, which is, you know, being able to go to the high and pull it in, being able to go low but pull it in, and just letting it all mix together and make it make sense. But like, you know, I used to search out like all the wooey stuff, and it was an avoidance thing. It was an escapism thing purely. I didn't want to look at myself. And I see those things really encouraged a lot in the wellness space. But it was funny for me when I wasn't looking for those things, and then I got blasted off into them, and it's like, you need it to like just do it from the right space. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think, you know, everyone's it's a we're all figuring out how to explore our metaphysical reality now, like, and that's that's like, this is like the new, like, space exploration. We're just doing it in a different way, right? We're not actually getting it
Yeah.
in. The mushrooms
Exploring
are
consciousness.
Hmm.
My two experiences ago, same with you, man. Every time, like, I'm like, man, maybe this will be one of those nice experiences people talk about where I feel good and like I'm just feeling self love and loving myself. And no, every time, ass kicked.
Yeah,
But I love I'm looking up at my whiteboard of notes. Um, what you were talking about like spiritual bypassing, and you made this really cool video on TikTok of I thought it was so funny and such a good example of what that can look like, and like that was good for me to be like, okay, I need to make sure
yeah,
that as I get more into this space and hear different, learn from different people, that I don't do that,
yeah,
because I have came across some people that I'm like, oh, that I think that's kind of what they're doing. But
yeah,
you were like, spiritual bypassing is being like, oh, my boss at Burger King doesn't know what it's like to be a star seed, so
yeah,
I can't work here anymore. Like, or like people that go to meditate only to escape and go off into the quantum and be like, oh, I love it up here.
yeah,
Whereas really, meditation is an opportunity to be an observer of thought and to get some really important insights on what's going on in your thinking brain, and in that part of you, and to observe it objectively and be like, whoa, like that has been powerful for me, which is basic mindfulness.
yeah,
Sometimes it's because I'm new to the spiritual world, I get insecure. Like I'll talk about a concept that's so new to me, and I feel like other people way years into their spiritual path be like, oh wow, local woman discovers mindfulness.
yeah. But like, I mean, I've met the teachers that, and nothing against them. I met the teachers that have been like the mindfulness Zen guy for 40 years, and then they're so like most of them are still great people. But like, I think working with them, like the glimmer starts to go off. Yeah, you're just a dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're just a dude. You know? Um, yeah, like I've been doing it for a year, but we're not any different.
But yeah, I mean, for me, that's like, oh gosh, you're trying to tell yourself that you're not mad, because like I would read like, oh, forgiving people that have wronged you is the key to like unlocking the next level, and I'm like, great, bet I
Yeah,
want to unlock the next level. I forgive them,
yeah,
and then I observe my thoughts, and I'm like, that's stupid fucking.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm like, okay, maybe you're still a little
yeah,
angry,
yeah,
and you have to like acknowledge the reality of that instead of just trying to pretend, or telling yourself. I mean, just like what I was describing with plant medicine, I was trying to control
yeah,
my healing experience, which is a theme for me. But I just thought it was so interesting what you said about spiritual bypassing, because you certainly could take all of these concepts and be like, oh, like for me, I'll be honest, when I started really understanding and experiencing things that like made me believe that this is a whatever word you want to use,
yeah,
simulation, matrix, whatever, I'm like, it doesn't matter. None of this is even real. We're just all here learning something. It's just like a fun little play. And that kind of took some of the heaviness off me for a minute. But then I absolutely see how like people are just using that to be like, don't worry about anything. Don't let anything stress you out. Don't worry about other people. Don't, because this is just all made up anyway.
yeah. Well, the video game's real. Like, like when something hits you and you feel a ping of pain, that ping of pain is real. And so to pretend like the ping of pain isn't real because you had an experience where you can kind of see the code. Congratulations, we're all in it still. You're in it with us. You're not above it. Like we're all experiencing it at the same time. And that's what it is. It's like they see the nature of the, quote unquote the game, and so then they think they can escape the game. Um, and maybe for some that might be your journey. You might supposed to be go to the Himalayan mountains and fuck off and meditate, right? Like that's generally I think a portion of our journeys for some people in the world. But like for most of us, we're here, and to invalidate our real lived experience, what we're like pain is real, love is real, like these things are very very real. When you feel love for someone, that's not fake. Like that's not just some illusion, and so like that's like we all go through that like nihilistic phase, I think, at one point of like, oh, none of this is real, it just none of it matters. And but it generally like it is a phase that the psyche needs to go through to like get to completion and integration. Like it's generally like I think this will be in psychology textbooks like 50 to 100 years from now. But like when you do expand in consciousness, there is quote unquote a void stage where like you see things a little bit from a mechanic lens of like, oh, I see what this is a simulation, da da da, da. None of it matters, da da da, da. What's the purpose? And it is like a little bit of a black hole, but like you move through it. But like these spiritual teachers get there and then they inflate their sense of self through that and they stay there and then they teach from that place, and you kind of just drive everyone insane, or you just turn them like into narcissistic assholes, you know. And I've seen that quite a bit in the space. So yeah,
Yeah, I've seen it too, and it's been good to like catch myself because sometimes like just I saw something early on that somebody posted that said when they went through their phase of like, oh, they don't get they're just in their a different state of consciousness. I'm over here on this state of consciousness
yeah,
and they're over here on this one. You're just creating more separation between yourself and others, which is creating isolation and loneliness, and also not a way to embody and serve as an example either, because people just think I've definitely met some people where I'm like kind of roll my eyes like,
yeah,
oh, we get it, you're so special, like
yeah.
there's this just like arrogance to them, and then I'm like, well, is this my own shadow and I'm like intimidated or jealous, or do I genuinely recognize this as like someone being spiritual bypassing essentially?
Yeah, and I think you're allowed to call it. You know, like I mean, there are some teachers in this sphere. I'm going to tell you, like the amount of respect I have for them. There are no words. Like I feel the authenticity of them. I feel like the resonance of what they've been through and integrated and how they've served and how they're choosing to show up. And like I'm like I don't put them on a pedestal, but there is a little bit of like, wow, like thank you. And I watch other teachers where I'm like, bro, go fuck yourself. Like, you know, and that's part of like the human experience. And yes, from a higher lens, I could look at that person who and say, well, this is them and they've been through this and they're on a part of their journey. And yes, that's a much healthier perspective to take. But sometimes we're a person, we have to be in the visceral responses. Sometimes you are going to judge people. Like don't indulge in it, but like let it be. But there is like, I think where the spiritual sphere misses is this whole thing of what's called ego integration. Okay. You
Mm.
have an ego. You are not supposed to escape the ego. Like the ego is the interface that you use to play the game. It's like trying to play the game without a controller. Okay. And which is why you go insane when they're like, I think like to have no ego, you're pushing yourself into layers of schizophrenia. I genuinely believe that. Like you need a layer and a concept of self. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that like we have to understand the unhealthy elements of the ego. And so the ego will put us above or below people. Like it happens in our society, right? I'm wealthier, I'm richer, I'm better looking, I'm more spiritual. I'm better than you. I have more value and worth than you. That's an ego distortion. And we have to work with it. It's just shadow. But spiritual people think they've escaped the ego and it doesn't apply to them, and then all the shadow just it's like not paying attention to the mold and the asbestos because I'm above that, and then it starts fuming up the whole house, you know. And that's just what I see a lot of this here. Like you need to pay attention to the ego, work with it, and get to a place where you're connected inside, and yes, you can understand like I might be more advanced in these layers in these areas of life or spirituality or whatever, but it doesn't make me better than this person. That doesn't mean that I should ever talk down to someone or look down upon someone, right? So
Which what you're describing about people who are like, oh, well, I've dissolved my ego or whatever. Well, then that's your ego telling you you're better than all the other people that
yeah,
haven't done so. Like, and
yeah,
like you said, in when you have those moments in a plant medicine experience where there is ego dissolution, I remember one time being like, what the fuck am I supposed to care about?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
you
right,
like, and then I've had experiences where like I start to lose a sense of self in a journey,
yeah,
which I'm like, ooh, can't remember you took some medicine, because you start to just feel one with everything else, which
yeah,
can be a beautiful experience to have and integrate, in a sense. But none of us would be here. We're here supposed to be doing things, and none of us would be doing that if we didn't have an ego. Because I interviewed a guy who was like, the ego would tell you just go sit and meditate all day. Like it wouldn't or not that, sorry, the other way around. If you didn't have an ego, you would just go sit and meditate all day. Like
Yeah.
the ego is what drives you to go and like actually do things. And I thought that was such a beautiful description that you just gave of it's a shadow. Shadows are not to be like shamed or pushed down, because pushing down just makes
Yeah.
them explode up more, but to acknowledge and be like, oh, okay. And I have heard spiritual teachers say things like I was reading a book and she was like talking about naming your ego as like a dog or a cat, or giving it a name or whatever. And she was like, and if you want yours to be something else, maybe that's just you wanting to be extra special. So just notice that, because
Funny, yeah.
like, and I thought that was such a cute way to be like, just notice when you're trying to elevate yourself above everyone else.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
Aware. Be
I,
aware.
I notice myself going those complexes. Like, yeah, I don't know when you go to politics, you don't think you have a fucking ego when you go to politics. Like, but like, yeah, but I mean, and this is why, like, really the spiritual journey is. I really feel to merge it with the rest of us and to integrate, because like I've noticed for myself that I've been in the sphere for 6 years, and as I even like explore like potentially running for political office down the line, like you're talking about holding a lot of responsibility and power and influence. And so when I go on my little journeys now, and I have some like higher self like communicate with me like in these journeys or experiences, and like there's more shadow work, and I'm like, but I've done the shadow work, da, 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 da. And it's like it's like if you want to go and have more power, like expect there to be more shadow work, like because you have to be able to hold this correctly, and there's nothing wrong with it, but just this is part of the game. And so that's why I think it's so dangerous when we have people who get into, even in the spiritual sphere, who get into huge positions of power influence, right? And they think that they're above the human experience. They think the ego and these shadow constructs don't apply to them. Like, oh my God, like that creates so much harm. And so we really need to like give this awareness out that if you're encountering teachers or anyone or political leaders who think that like they're above everything and that they have all the answers and these things don't apply to them, you better watch the fuck out.
Yeah.
Because it's not someone to actually trust. Um, I'm big like I'm bringing him up on every podcast lately, but I'm going to bring him up again. But like, as a guy on this journey of like self healing and development, I'm looking for like role models, and it's hard for me in right now to find some man on stage who I look up to and say this is a guy that I want to model myself after. But like, for over a decade, I've always found myself attracted to the story of Abraham Lincoln, and like Lincoln like suffered from depression. Like he would have been diagnosed as manic bipolar if he was in today's society. Like the guy always lost. Like he lost like 7 of 8 elections before he went for president. Um, and but he was so humble in it. Like he was never like he was just like even when he was president, he was just still in pain, and he accepted the pain, he accepted the insecurities, he accepted the flaws, right? Like this is a man by like today's standards of what's masculine or whatever, he probably wouldn't have fit that. But yet, like it was his grounding and his humility, his grounding and understanding all these things that led him to be such a, like I would call it, like a divine man. And I think like that's what we're trying to like normalize now. Like the great people of our past, they didn't float around and be like, look how amazing I am, da 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 da, right? Like they were really like, man, like shit's tough. It's tough in here. Like it's tough in here, but I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best, and and I'm gonna try and do what's right for everyone else, and that's enough, you know. Um, and I just, I don't go to a lot of meditation retreats where that's taught, but there are some. But like, I I'm swear that badly, but like no, I think we have to redefine our notion of what it is to really to work towards being this better version of ourselves, and then it probably looks different than what we think. It sometimes it is just admitting like how flawed and insecure we feel, and still willing to do and step up despite that. And
God,
it's really beautiful.
yeah, that's so beautiful. I have this, and we all do, we all have it, but I have this radar. Like I can tell when people are being disingenuine always, immediately. And sometimes I tell people that sometimes it's a curse because I'm disappointed, like, and sometimes I have this like dissonance because I'm like, wait, this is a really spiritual person who I want to look up to and I want to be friends with. But I'm like, I have that feeling of like, oh, there's some inauthenticity there, and they're not being honest about, like you said, grounded in their humility. And I know that I started this podcast as a hobby because I wanted to talk about cool stuff with cool people,
Yeah,
and I wanted to stop drinking,
yeah,
binge drinking on the weekends, and I needed a hobby.
yeah,
And so now it's turned into like, okay, am I headed towards like a coaching space, or should I be selling some sort of like guide? And then I'm like, I don't, I'm not there. But I was like, are
yeah,
other people there? Like, so just trying to figure out how to show up in this space in my authenticity and be
yeah,
like, because there's some things I'm really still struggling with, but I know that I wouldn't be struggling so much in certain areas of my life if I wasn't meant to like speak out about it in
yeah,
this space and try to help other people. And that's tough, man. It's tough to be like, okay, even though there's a lot of other people who are seem to be speaking from this super evolved space where they have it all figured out, I'm going to come on here and be like, this is kicking my ass,
yeah, yeah.
and I hope this helps somebody.
It's funny because it's like I do teach this thing to people I work with where I say that because I believe, this is my belief system. Like I believe that like you do incarnate with a sense of like a purpose or whatever. Not that it always stays consistent, but we kind of know what we came here to do. And it's not better or worse. Like we all make our choices. Like some of us choose like, hey, I just want to be on a farm. Like, that's amazing. Like I
Yeah.
sometimes get jealous and envious of that one. Right? It's a lot less painful. And so but anyways, like I've learned that if you have a bigger purpose, like and like I said, you're going to hold a lot of responsibility, or the way that you speak is going to influence the way that people interact with the reality and themselves. Like life's going to be harder for you. Like it's and I don't yeah I want to use that language. Like you're going to go through more because you have to understand more. You have to understand different layers of yourself. You have to be more conscious of your shadows. Like and so I mean, my part of my journey was I've obviously been through a lot, and like when I was like 19, 20 years old, um, I just wanted to be a high school teacher. I felt that was a good like landing spot for me with my background and everything. Felt like I would have been good at it. I didn't have any bigger ambitions than that, and life has socked me in the face over and over again for like the last like 12 years, 14 years, from the beginning, honestly. And so like since I was born, but like somehow naturally it
Since
does seem,
birth.
yeah, since birth, but somehow naturally it does seem that like I'm getting into a space where it's not even I'm trying, but I am responsible for people's health and well-being. I am responsible for how people relate to their political environment now and stuff. And so, like, I better understand a lot, and I better understand what this pain is that other people are holding, because it lives inside me too, you know. When
You
someone
can see,
comes,
you can feel it when you see it.
I can feel when I see it because it's within me as well, and that's what empathy is. I think a lot of times, and like people are going through it, and all everyone wants to do is to be seen. And so when we can see them because we understand it, like that there's so much power in that. Um, and when clients come to me and they're like, I'm going through this and I don't know what I'm doing and I'm like, me too. They're like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, but like this is what it is, I'm human too, and they feel a lot better from that. So I've worked with people, Taylor, that like they're so spiritually advanced. Like I'll tell you, like they're like the things that they can do blow my mind. Like, and if you saw them walking down the street, you would have no idea. Not to make fun of you, I'm allowed this one. Like they're not wearing some cape, right? Like a million medallions, right? It could be a hairdresser or a personal trainer. I'm being dead serious. I'm using real anecdotes here, and like you would never know. Isn't that that's amazing? Like you would never
Yeah.
know, And they've had difficult lives. They've gone through a lot, but the things they can do are profound, and they're not chucking themselves out there like that, and they're not acting above anyone. And those are the people I look at. I'm like, I want to be around you. Like
Yeah.
I trust you, right?
God, everything you just said about empathy, what a beautiful. I talked about that in one of my earlier episodes, like, because I think that some of the most empathic, sensitive people I know are in a space right now in life where they're very hardened and angry, which is the space I was in 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, because it is hard to feel that deep. Like
Yeah,
when you see pain, like working in the school, like when you
yeah,
see pain and it brings up the deep levels of pain that you felt, it's like it's when you see it on the news, you see it in front of you, you see it everywhere. It's like you just want to like take a step back because it's overwhelming to be sensitive. And I think some of the most sensitive people are some of your most angry, like guarded, would like to put this front up that they hate everything because they're so, yeah, yeah, right? Because you're so sensitive that it's like, let me just back off from this. I can't like handle how, because if you can be that angry, you can be that sad. If you can be
yeah,
that angry, you can love that deep. Like
yeah.
it's passion. It's why toxic relationships, when people haven't done their work, are explosive with
Yeah.
magnetism. It's
Dopamine on steroids. Yeah,
it's because there's an intensity to the passion, like that that meme you see about like about crazy women and like there being all this passion there. Like there's something rooted in that,
yeah,
because of like, I had an ex-boyfriend that was very much the epitome of that, and his dog ran off one time, and he was like, you know what, if the dog wants to leave, if he didn't, I feed him every day, I take care of him, he was asleep, forget him, forget that dog. And I was like, do you want to go look for the dog? Like he was just so overwhelmed by how upset he was that he had this like
yeah.
angry dismissive front that came up. And
Yeah.
so sensitivity is I think we're taught that it is a flaw, and I used to feel like in some ways it was a curse, and it really took a lot of deep healing work to be like, oh, it is such a gift to be
Yeah.
able to feel things so deeply. And I just loved so much that description of that is what empathy is. You've actually experienced on a cellular level pain that deep, so when you see it, you can feel it in your own body. And if you
Right.
haven't experienced it, you don't have that capacity. And I mean, that's okay. But yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
I think, how did I say his name? Gabor Mate.
Yeah.
Gabor Mate?
That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to call him. I don't think he'd be offended.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
he spoke recently on a podcast about hypnotic passivity. And I hadn't heard that term before, but it was basically describing like people watching horrors in the world and all around them and just
Yeah.
being completely numb to it in a hypnotic state is what he called it.
I will. I mean, it's like I understand it because I've gone through it as well. And I'll say this: it's like here's where I'm at, where it's like, and I'm very invested in what's going on overseas and abroad. But I understand this to a deep layer. Like when people are like, how do people in America not care? I'm like, I fully get it. Like, I mean, your nervous system is flared up because you're trying to make ends meet in your own life. Like there's job insecurity. You don't like housing insecurity, right? You're barely making rent. Like you're working 9 to 5, like, and just going and going and going. Um, and you've got your own childhood trauma that you haven't been able to reconcile. There hasn't been space for it because you're trying to make those ends meet. And then you get online and you see kids being blown up. Like, how do you have the emotional space? And then you see online that I can call my senators, I can call my congresspeople, and nothing gets done. And so and you're barely holding it together to look after your family potentially. you know? And so like you have to shut it. Like, and this is why I say like the system that has been created in America that operates like this, it feels intentional to me, of like we keep people in the survivalist states, or we keep them so content with pleasure and entertainment that like, and they don't understand the paths to impact or affect change. Like it does create like almost like this opioid effect within you. And the brain just doesn't know how to deal with that. It doesn't understand to, and it reduces produces chemicals. And I've experienced it within myself, you know, and so yeah, like there's just a lot to be deconstructed here. We have to at least be aware that this is what's going on for us. But like, I mean, this isn't necessarily a time for a joke, but like it was funny to me when like there was all this news about there being ETs and all this stuff. I remember going on TikTok and all I saw was in the comments like, yeah, but will the ETs pay my grocery bill? Like no one gave a shit. Like everyone was like, okay, like I have this medical debt that I fucking can't afford. Like what are they gonna do? And so like, yeah, like I mean, so that's why I also like don't always appreciate these social justice movements that are like I know they're well intentioned. They're like, how do you not like? And it's like you don't know what that person's going through. You don't know what they have space for. And and if people don't feel like they have even the power to affect change, like they're not going to let that emotional experience in. They're going to have to blind themselves.
Yeah.
When we start creating real pathways for people to be able to influence things, that fire can come online now. Like that emotional passivity will lower. But we got to work there. This isn't an overnight process.
That was such a, again, a great way to respond to that, because that's exactly reflective of my own journey. I was like, had all this passion and this intensity for politics and for the
Yeah,
education system and educational reform. And for the past year of my journey, I've completely
yeah.
stepped back and avoided it because I didn't have the capacity.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm very my posts now online have turned mostly political, which is terrible for my business. Yeah, my income's gonna take a dive. But like, I'll tell you, there was a 2 to 3 year period where what was going on political did not even register for me, and there wasn't space for it. And so I have clients come in who are like, I'm not paying attention. I'm like, it's okay. Like it's okay. Like if you're actually trying to pay attention and your system is still like, no, you've got to listen to that. Um, there were parts of my journey and experience where I was so deep in my own like layers of trauma and shadows, and like there was not space to come up and then take that into. There just wasn't, and no one would benefit from me doing that. Like no one would benefit me doing that. And so
That
this is also why, like, it's like we lower someone down a well, right? And then we yell at them that they're not running on land when they see like a rabbit herding, and it's like we just lower them in the well to grab us water, like they can't run. And so this is why it's okay to understand like where we are at our specific part of our journey, what we need in those moments, right? And to trust that like I got clear hits like a couple years ago that like, hey, like some force is gonna utilize me like to speak on political stuff now, right? Like I felt like, oh, this is me in a flow state now. Like this is where I'm moving to. Like we're a cohesive thing, and so I'm gonna trust that. And so for some people that's not their journey right now, that's okay.
Gosh, yes, absolutely. And I think, heavy on the part where you said that's not going to benefit anyone until I get back into a space where I can show up the way I need to and have worked through my own stuff, and I'm not using that as a channel for my anger, or I'm not using that as a way to bypass my own work. That's when I can really show up with my full energy and be able to influence or make change or be in my own, fulfill my own purpose in it. Because like you, at some point I know there's something that I'm meant to do, or I wouldn't have had those experiences.
Yeah, and you have to trust the trajectory of your own path and and the nuance in it. You know, like I didn't pay attention to anything legal for years, and then they're like, "Hey, by the way, like you're going back and you're going to speak on legal stuff." I'm like, "What?" But it's like but like I said, like I needed to tend to my psychological world for a while, and I needed to be laser focused on that, and that's okay. And so you got to give people space to understand themselves and to trust where they're at in their own process.
Yes, absolutely. Gosh, Zach, thank you so much for being here today. I have personally, this has been healing for me, and I have learned so much. So I know that there are going to be people that listen that feel the same. So very much appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on. It's been great.
Bye, everybody. Until next time.